Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we follow Diep as her hereditary illness suddenly causes her to collapse at home, leaving James in a desperate race against time to save both her and their unborn child. Rushing through the storm to the hospital, James's fear turns into unshakable determination as he stays by her side through every injection, every tear, and every sleepless night. Although the doctors confirm that the baby is safe, Diep's body remains weak, forcing them both to confront the reality of her condition. Stay with us until the end to witness how love can endure, even when life itself feels fragile. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. Soft morning light spills through the open window, painting golden streaks across the small study where Diep and little Nye sit side by side. The hum of life outside, the rustle of trees, the chirp of sparrows blends with the sound of Diep's gentle laughter. "Look here, Nye," she says, pointing to a colorful picture book. "What's this? A squirrel? And this one? A frog?" Nye giggles, her tiny finger landing on the wrong image, earning a soft chuckle from her mother. "Close," Diep teases, brushing a strand of hair from Nie's face. The warmth in the room feels endless, a little pocket of joy carved out from the world. Diep leans closer, tracing lines between two pages. "Let's play. Find 5 differences," she says, her tone playful yet patient. The flowers in the window, the night light's color. Can you spot what's missing? Nye nods eagerly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Each sound of her laughter fills the air like wind chimes in sunlight. For a moment, it feels like nothing could disturb this peace. But then, something shifts. A faint dizziness washes over Diep. Her vision flickers, edges of the room blurring into pale light. She pauses, one hand pressed to her temple, trying to steady herself. The smile on her face falters. Nye looks up, confused. "Mama?" she whispers. Diep forces a smile, her lips trembling. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little tired." But her skin grows pale, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She takes a slow breath, though the air feels heavier by the second. The laughter fades, replaced by the low hum of the wind outside. The clock ticks. The world narrows. She grips the table, fighting the sudden wave of nausea and lightheadedness. Her vision sways. Then darkness creeps in from the edges. Nye's laughter fades into a distant echo as the storm begins to stir outside, wind rattling the window panes. "It's okay, Nye," Diep murmurs weakly, but the words dissolve on her tongue. Moments later, the door bursts open. James stands there, drenched in worry, his eyes widening at the sight before him. "Diep." He rushes forward just as she collapses, catching her before she hits the floor. Her body feels weightless in his arms, her breath shallow. "Hold on. I've got you," he whispers, voice shaking but determined. The storm outside intensifies. Within minutes, he's carrying her to the car, Nye clutching his shirt, crying softly. The sky darkens as thunder rumbles, echoing the panic in his chest. Rain begins to pour, blurring the world beyond the windshield. James grips the steering wheel, one hand holding Diep's wrist to feel her pulse. "Stay with me, please," he mutters. The road twists toward Putho Hospital, slick with rain and mud. Every second feels eternal. By the time they arrive, dawn has broken. The clock reads 5:31 a.m. Nurses rush forward as James carries Diep through the hospital doors. She fainted suddenly. She's pregnant. Please, help her. His voice cracks, desperation lacing every word. Doctors take over. Their calm efficiency, a sharp contrast to James's panic. He stands frozen in the corridor, his shirt soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. Through the glass window, he catches sight of Diep on the hospital bed, so fragile, surrounded by machines and wires. His chest tightens, the sight of her vulnerability cutting deep. The corridor feels cold, sterile. He leans against the wall, his mind spinning. A faint echo of thunder rolls outside, mingling with the rhythmic beeping from inside the room. The thought claws at him. What if he's too late? What if this time, fate takes her away? After what feels like hours, a doctor steps out, removing his gloves. "She's stable for now," he says. Voice firm but kind. "It's her hereditary condition. It caused a sudden drop in blood pressure. The baby's heartbeat weakened briefly, but both mother and child are safe. She needs rest and close monitoring." James exhales, knees weak with relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much," he murmurs, bowing slightly. His eyes glisten as he turns toward the window again. Inside, Diep lies motionless, an IV attached to her arm. Even in her pale stillness, she looks peaceful, fragile, yet beautiful. He enters quietly, sitting by her side. Her eyelids flutter open. "James," she whispers, her voice faint. "Don't talk," he says softly. "You're okay now. Just rest." Tears well up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I scared you again." James shakes his head. "Don't you ever apologize for that." He squeezes her hand. "You and our baby are the most important things in my life." Outside, rain taps gently against the window. Inside, the room is filled with quiet hums of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. Diep looks up at him, her gaze filled with tenderness. "It's my fault," she whispers. "I should have told you sooner. This illness, it runs in my family. When the weather changes, my body can't handle it well. Sometimes I feel dizzy or faint without warning." James listens silently, his heart heavy but calm. He brushes a tear from her cheek. "It doesn't change anything," he says. "All that matters is you're here, with me." She smiles faintly. "But if something ever happens to me," he cuts her off gently. "Don't say that." His voice cracks, raw with emotion. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Minutes later, a nurse enters with medication. James helps Diep sit up slowly, supporting her back with one arm. She winces as the needle pierces her skin, her fourth injection that morning. The pain draws tears to her eyes. James's voice softens. "It's okay. Cry if you need to. It'll hurt less." She looks at him, the corners of her mouth trembling into a weak smile. "You always say that," she whispers, "because it's true." He wipes her tears, then stands to fetch porridge from the canteen. When he returns, the bowl is still steaming. He sits by her bedside again, blowing gently on the spoon before feeding her. "Eat a little," he says. "You need strength for both of you." Diep opens her mouth obediently, swallowing the bland porridge with effort. "It tastes like paper," she jokes softly. James chuckles, the sound low and tender. Good. That means it's hospital approved. For a brief moment, the heaviness lifts. They share a quiet smile. One of those rare moments when love feels louder than fear. But beneath his calm, James's thoughts race. The doctor's words echo in his mind. Hereditary condition, high risk, careful monitoring. As Diep finishes eating, he adjusts the blanket around her shoulders, brushing her hair back. "Get some rest," he murmurs. She nods, eyes fluttering closed, her fingers still intertwined with his. The rain outside has softened into a drizzle, a lullaby against the glass. James stays by her side, watching every rise and fall of her chest. Each breath she takes feels like a victory, a reminder that love, fragile as it is, can still hold steady in the storm. He leans forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe now," he whispers, "both of you." But deep down, a quiet fear lingers, a whisper that fate isn't done testing them yet. Morning light seeps gently into the hospital room, washing over the pale walls and the quiet stillness that lingers after a long, sleepless night. James sits slouched in the chair beside Diep's bed, exhaustion etched across his face. The faint rhythm of the heart monitor is steady now, soft beeps that seem to echo like small reassurances. Diep stirs, her eyelashes fluttering. "James," she whispers, voice still weak. "Did you sleep at all?" He lifts his head, forcing a smile. "A little," he lies, though the shadows under his eyes betray him. "Don't worry about me. Just rest." She glances at him with a tired smile. "You say that like it's easy." "Because it should be," he replies softly. "You're safe now. The doctor said your vitals are stable, and the baby's heartbeat is normal again. That's all that matters." A moment of silence passes, filled only by the sound of rain dripping outside the window. The storm has eased, but the scent of wet earth still lingers in the air. Diep's hand trembles slightly as she reaches for James's. "Last night," she says faintly, "I really thought maybe I wouldn't wake up." James's heart tightens. He squeezes her hand gently, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "Don't say that," he murmurs. "You're here, and that's what matters. You're stronger than you think." She looks at him, eyes glistening. "It's not strength, James. It's you. Every time I fall, you're the one who catches me." James doesn't answer right away. His throat tightens as he watches her, so fragile, yet filled with quiet resilience. "Then I'll keep catching you," he says finally, "as long as I live." A nurse enters quietly with a tray of food, plain rice, soup, and a cup of warm water. "It's time for her medication," she says kindly. James nods, thanking her. He helps Diep sit up, adjusting her pillow and holding the bowl close. "Eat slowly," he says, his voice gentle but firm. "You need strength." Diep tries to smile. "You sound just like the nurse." "Maybe I missed my calling," he teases softly, stirring the porridge before offering her a spoonful. She takes it, chewing slowly. "It's bland," she murmurs with a weak chuckle. "Good. That means it's healthy," he replies, smiling faintly. "You can scold me for the taste later when we're home." Diep glances up at him, eyes tender. "Home," she repeats quietly. "It feels far away right now." James's expression softens. It's waiting for us. You just need a little more time. She lowers her gaze to the bowl. The doctor said this illness, it's in my bloodline. I can manage it, but it'll always be there. I don't want to be a burden. James sets the bowl aside and takes her hand again. You're not a burden. You're my family. And families take care of each other. Her eyes fill with tears, shimmering in the dim hospital light. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, he says, brushing a tear from her cheek. You and our baby are everything to me. No sickness can change that. A tear slips down her face as she leans weakly against the pillow. You shouldn't have to live with worry every day. James shakes his head. I don't see it as worry. I see it as love. For a long moment, neither speaks. The world outside hums softly, rain dripping from the eaves, distant chatter from the hallway. Inside, the room feels like a fragile cocoon of warmth amid the cold sterility of the hospital. When the nurse returns, she checks Diep's pulse and adjusts the IV drip. Her blood pressure is more stable now, she notes, but her body's still weak. She needs to stay a few more days for observation. James nods. Of course. We're not going anywhere until she's fully ready. After the nurse leaves, Diep looks at him and smiles faintly. You really mean it, don't you? He grins softly. I meant every word. Hours pass. The clock ticks quietly, marking time in slow, careful beats. James busies himself with small things, folding Diep's blanket, wiping her forehead with a damp towel, refilling her cup of warm water. Each gesture, though simple, carries the weight of his devotion. In the afternoon, he returns from the cafeteria with a small tray. Boiled vegetables, a little rice, and some fruit slices. The nurse said you can eat this, he tells her. Diep takes a bite, then looks at him with amusement. You've become my personal chef now. He chuckles. Then I'll cook for you every day if it keeps you healthy. She gazes at him lovingly, her heart swelling with gratitude. James, she says softly, you're too good to me. No, he replies, shaking his head. You're the reason I've learned what real love means. The sky outside darkens again as night begins to fall. The lights in the hospital hallway flicker on, casting a warm glow through the glass door. Diep's eyelids grow heavy, exhaustion slowly overtaking her. Rest, James whispers, standing up to fix the blanket around her shoulders. I'll be right here. She looks at him one last time before sleep claims her. Promise? He leans close, brushing his lips against her forehead. Always. As Diep drifts into slumber, James sits back down, watching her breathe. Her chest rises and falls in steady rhythm, the faint beep of the monitor syncing with her heartbeat. He exhales slowly, relief softening his features. But even in the calm, a quiet fear lingers. He knows her illness won't vanish overnight. There will be more fainting spells, more scares, more nights like this. Yet, sitting there, her hand in his, he realizes something unshakable. No matter how uncertain the road ahead, he will face it all with her. Hours later, the rain starts again, tapping lightly on the window pane. James remains awake, eyes fixed on Diep. The scent of antiseptic lingers, mingling with the soft hum of machines. He reaches out, adjusting the IV tube slightly, making sure she's comfortable. You've scared me more times than I can count, he whispers, voice trembling. But every time you open your eyes, I know it's worth it. The room grows quiet once more, filled only with the soft rhythm of life, the heartbeat of a mother, the devotion of a husband, and the silent promise that love will keep them standing, no matter how fragile the days become. James closes his eyes for a moment, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He doesn't sleep deeply, just enough to dream of Diep smiling again, healthy, holding their baby in her arms. A dream he silently vows to turn into reality, no matter how long it takes.